All right, and we're back for another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows, and if you can, please give us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you can also like, share, subscribe, follow, do whatever you can to support us at Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Game Source, and the Dom-Ination Sports Nation. It is truly appreciated. I just want to mention real quickly, I've got great episodes already up for this week on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel. Also, a Game Source profile on the upcoming game Watch Dogs Legion, and also an awesome Lakers Fast Break podcast as well. All right, week 6 is in the books. I hope everybody had a great NFL weekend, and I hope everyone had a great fantasy football weekend. We've got a lot to talk about today, including updates on our Pick'em Challenge, and also as well, another great woof, woof, woof doghouse is concerned. But here today, he just shakes his head. You knew it was the first time I said that. You knew I was going to go crazy with it, but
I warned you could get back in it with one bad week from me, but we'll talk later.
We'll talk later indeed. But here today to talk about that and so much more are two great guests indeed, as always. My co-host in crime, it is Chris Lardieri at Chris L Sports on Twitter, Chris Lardieri on LinkedIn. You can reach out to him there or at Inside Sports. Plus also as well, the man behind Dom-Ination Sports Nation. It is his son, as he says, the betterment of him. I said he brings class to the show. I said you both bring class to the show. And unfortunately, I bring something else to the show, which is not quite class, but I'm here anyways. It is Dominic Lardieri. And Dominic, great to have you here. Chris, also great to have you here as well.
Likewise, thanks for having both of us back. And before I forget, if you want to reach out to us, we're now on Instagram at Dom-Ination Sports Nation, all one word. You have any fantasy questions, we shall answer them there.
There we go. Or at Chris L Sports on Twitter. So that's an easy one.
Exactly.
That's an easy one for me to remember. So that's why I go with that one. That's my go-to right there for in case
Yep. And much like you, I'm just the host of that show. So I just set Dom up for success and let him pick out his Instagram handle and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. It was a great weekend for a lot of players out there because I know there was a lot of interested parties when it comes to Derrick Henry. But we'll also talk about him coming up in the show, plus Aaron Rodgers. What's up with that? I've been speaking such great things about Aaron Rodgers, and he goes ahead and lets me down. Is this something that's going to be a fluke or something going forward where there's an issue where for teams that have him as their starting quarterback? We're going to talk about that coming up. The Fitzmagic is gone. We're also going to talk about that as well. Plus, again, Doghouse, Pick'em Challenge, and is it worth it to hold on to your kicker? We're going to talk about on the show as well. But first, it is the Fitzmagic. As Ryan Fitzpatrick of the Miami Dolphins starting quarterback is no longer the starting quarterback, even though he's had two of the best weeks of his career. Wouldn't you know? On a high, goes into San Francisco, has a sensational game and throws a lot of touchdowns. It's a sensational game, blows out the Niners, comes back the next week, has another really, really good performance on an all-time high. His team is doing really well, but going into the bye, the team announces, I'm so sorry, but we're going to go ahead and put Tua into the game as the starting quarterback coming up next week. Not this week because they're on a bye, but next week. So, Dom, I want to hear from you first, my friend. What are your thoughts on the Fitzmagic being gone in Miami?
Well, I was actually kind of surprised about this. I thought maybe they'd put Tua in at the end of the year so he could just get a fresh start in his second season. But Ryan Fitzpatrick's been playing really well, like you said, Gerald, and I was really surprised when I heard the news, but I just saw Tua at Alabama for 3 years, 2 years as a starter. I think that he's mature enough to be the starter, and he has some good pieces around him.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend. He does. He does. The team is on the upswing. I mean, he's in a situation. Tua Tagliova, as far as him being able to go ahead and be at a place where he can succeed because he's got a lot of nice things around him. Myles Gaskin has done a great job of as far as improving that running game. Big surprise. I have him on one of my fantasy teams. So I was very happy with his performance last week, getting 91 yards, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And then also he has a nice set of receivers. It's all set up for him to succeed. And I want to ask you this, Chris. Do you think going forward, I'm going to say right now, I thought it was a mistake. But again, it seems like it must be maybe an edict from above, per se. I'm not sure if that sounds like it's a head coach is doing, but it sounded like that this is something from above his pay grade. And in the end, it might be something where fantasy owners are now mad. You might have Miami Dolphins fans mad too, if he's not going to get an early hook or anything like that, because this could be a situation where you have all that momentum going for the Miami Dolphins, and it comes to a screeching halt.
I'm going to have to agree with you. I was surprised by the move as well. And the only thing I could think of is the GM or ownership said this guy's got to play by a certain week. Or
it sounds like it.
Yeah,
it sounds like it.
And then with the bye week, I mean, that's fishy to me too. Sounds like to me they're giving him an extra week of preparation or reps with the first team. I don't know. I mean, I legitimately felt bad for Fitzpatrick, where he said he was surprised and saddened by the move and whatnot. But I think from a fantasy perspective, you're absolutely right. I think this could affect the Gaskins of the world. I think, who knows what it does for their passing yards. I'm not saying Ryan Fitzpatrick is Drew Brees by any means. But
well, he's a top 10, as of right now, a top 10 fantasy football quarterback.
Yeah, and a lot of that's based off he had a couple huge weeks, and going up the Jets would probably be good for you and me in our fantasy football careers too if we played. But regardless, the guy puts up solid numbers, and everyone around him has benefited this year. And with Tua, do I think he'll be an excellent NFL quarterback? I think there's a high likelihood of that. But right now, throwing him to the Wolves in the middle of the season, I don't think that's the best move, and I would proceed with caution as a fantasy owner.
It's very concerning if you're a Miami Dolphins fan. I'm not, but it is concerning. The reason why I say is, like you said, throwing him out to the Wolves, I mean, he is going to get 2 weeks of prep, but it's a situation where the team is on an upswing. The team is now starting to think some playoffs. And Dom, I mean, I could say right now that if you have him out there as a fantasy football player, as far as Tua, is he the right choice to go ahead and start? I would be very apprehensive in doing so.
I just see you have to wait a couple of weeks and see what he puts up. If he's uncomfortable with, of course, he's a rookie this year, so he may be uncomfortable with playing in the NFL. I think that you probably have to stash him as a backup or a third string if you're worried about your quarterback getting injured. So I wouldn't start him his first week. I'd wait a couple weeks, see what he does, and if he doesn't do well, then I would probably drop him. And if he does, then I guess he could be a backup or a starter if you're that desperate at quarterback.
Well, you got to be really desperate if that's the case, because putting someone out there who's basically cold. I mean, Bobby Aber, you weren't going to put him, or Justin Aber. Justin, yeah, Justin. I keep thinking like the water boy and all that. Justin Aber, coming off that great performance in his first actual game, you were still reluctant to go ahead and start him, although he's proven to be a pretty good, quarterback right now off the get-go. And I understand Tua is, as far as intriguing, because the aspect he provides to you as far as being able to run the ball, and is in that mold, what we're seeing now at the top, the very top of the rankings right now with, hey, what do you know? My quarterback in the ESPN league, Kyler Murray at number 1, Patrick Mahomes, another versatile running quarterback, at number 2, Josh Allen, who can also run, at number 3, Russell Wilson at number 4, and Deshaun Watson, who I also have on my team as well. We're coming up right there. So all those quarterbacks have one thing in common, besides obviously good numbers right now, and that is that they can run and get you touchdowns on the ground. And that's something that could be very intriguing for fantasy football owners. Those individuals out there, Chris, that may have held on to him if you're in like deep leagues or things like nature. I think that's a good thing going forward. But would you go ahead and let's say he's available on a waiver wire? Would he be intriguing to go ahead and take up a roster spot right now?
Only if you have the room, and I think that's hard to do. We're in the midst of bye weeks. We've had a flurry of injuries, never mind COVID issues in the league. Running backs are dropping like flies. For instance, we've got Raheem Mostert. So there are points in time where Dom and I debate, do we even keep him knowing he's going to be out for a few weeks? I'm not sure. But if you are in one of those deeper roster leagues, or if you're past bye weeks with some of your key running backs, receivers, or quarterbacks, maybe he's worth a stash. I don't advocate normally hanging on to 3 quarterbacks in any one league, but as we know, this is an unprecedented year and anything can happen at any time. And even if this was a normal non-pandemic year, it feels like the injuries have really piled up here in October.
Well, my strategy of keeping a lot of quarterbacks, where I keep even more than that, it's worked in one where I'm 5-1 on my sleeper team. My ESPN team, because nobody bid at my trades, is now coming up back to haunt me. And this is the problem that you have, because you fill up those roster spots and you have nothing, because especially if they don't stay healthy, which I've had a horrendous time dealing with injury, and I've had to now waive a whole bunch of players just because they're on bye weeks right now and injuries. So I hear you. When it works for you, it works for you. When it doesn't, it's a situation. So I know for people out there, unless you have the space, I would say maybe just keep an eye on Tua, see how he develops in that first couple weeks. I agree with Dom on his assessment of that. So if you want to go ahead and have questions for us on Tua, whether or not to take him now, I'd go ahead and give us just let us know. Chris at Chris L Sports, at Dom-Ination Sports Nation on Instagram, or right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football on Facebook as well, social media and all that. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on Tua, because he is very divisive right now. Not only the fact that we don't know what his future is starting right in the middle of the season, but also replacing a very hot quarterback, and that's never a popular move, whichever team you're a fan of. Well, my friends, we're going strong right here on this week's episode. I want to go ahead and talk about Aaron Rodgers, who, Chris, for 2 years, I've sung the praises of his accuracy. It seemed like at times, even though he wasn't getting the yards like last year, just still precision, accuracy, the fact that he was throwing so few interceptions. I think he threw one last year, all of last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something ridiculous like that, yeah.
And then now he threw 2. He had a horrible game in his last game. 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, 16 out of, I think it was like 35, to some god-awful number there for a quarterback. Dom, I want to ask you this. Is this something that you're going to sense is a fluke? I'm thinking that it is. But are you seeing something more? Do you think you want to put him on the bench for a couple weeks and see how it plays out? Or do you think you should just go ahead and, you know what? It's a fluke happening. I think he's a good quarterback. This is only 2 interceptions of the season, and I'm going to go strong from here.
Yeah, well, honestly, I think Aaron Rodgers had a tough matchup. I think the Buccaneers defense is a bit underrated with how they played on Sunday. I was surprised that he threw 2 interceptions. It could have been 2 pick sixes. The other one almost got returned for a touchdown. But like my dad told me, like when we were watching the game on Sunday, the Packers are running the ball really well for their first 2 drives where they got a field goal and a touchdown. And why didn't they just stick to the run? They could have prevented the pick 6, and they couldn't have given the Buccaneers any motivation to score or anything like that. So if they just kept it on the ground with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, they probably would have had a better game.
I agree with you on that. And I'm thinking, like I said, this is going to be just a blip in the road. Chris, seeing as where he's performed the past couple of years, I think this is a situation where people that are having him as a starter on their fantasy leagues should not go ahead and panic, because I'm not. He's my starter next week on my sleeper, my deep team. So I'm not panicking yet. Of course, I had Dak Prescott as one of my other major ones. So right now, he's my best quarterback by default. But be that as it may, I think I'm not going to panic right now.
No, you shouldn't. I heard one theory today out there that last year the Packers had a dud when they came to LA to play the Chargers. This year it was in Tampa. So I'll just take that to one next ridiculous level and say the Packers don't like playing in warm weather cities or have a dud there annually. And then secondarily, look, they play in the NFC North. I know the Bears have a nice record where defenses come around. They seem like they're doing better with Nick Foles, but I don't see a heck of a lot of roadblocks in the way for Rodgers and the Packers within the division. So I think that's another bright spot for you as he will feast on teams like the Lions and the Vikings' porous defenses. I think that bodes well for his fantasy fortunes.
I think it does as well. I think it's going to be something where he'll get healthy fantasy-wise, quote unquote. He'll get healthy real quick. So I don't think you should panic on Aaron Rodgers. I would keep him as your QB1. I understand he had an awful game, but my gosh, in the whole pantheon of what he's done in the past 2-3 years, this is by far and away the worst game he's had. Yes, I understand he's a little older. I still think he's got a lot left in the tank. He's had a great year so far, and 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's thrown, 1,500 yards, I think. He's done a great job so far. So I would say go ahead and hold on to him and start him as your number one quarterback. I wouldn't hit the panic button on him just yet. Speaking of panic buttons, I want to ask you this, Chris. I'm sure the team on the other side of many of Derrick Henry's runs on Sunday were hitting the panic button because they couldn't seem to stop him. 212 yards. And also, 2 touchdowns, I think, as well. 50 yards rushing. He had almost 275 yards in total offense. Truly an outstanding game. 40 points plus on the ESPN meter there. I want to ask you this, Dom, though. Derrick Henry is the type of individual that's getting you a lot of yards, but not as many touchdowns as you should see. He's letting other running backs. In fact, Alvin Kamara, Chris and I just talked about a couple weeks ago about him being the best running back in fantasy. I don't think that really should be the case. For some reason, there's kind of a disconnect when it comes to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry leads the NFL in rushing, yet is not leading running backs in fantasy. Why is that the case?
Well, I think part of it is that they have Ryan Tannehill, and like I saw on Sunday, they like to pass in the red zone rather than running. I mean, besides that Wildcat touchdown from Henry in overtime, most of their red zone touchdowns were passes or Tannehill ran in for one. So I just don't think that Henry gets as many touches in the red zone as he should. I mean, if it's like a first and goal at the 2-yard line, then yes, you give it to him. But like you saw, he had a 94-yard touchdown. Not many people expect that to happen. So he gets like these long touchdowns. It's probably better, but would you rather have an Alvin Kamara that will guarantee you to get 2 touchdowns a game, or would you rather have a Derrick Henry that might get a 51-yard touchdown or something like that? So you just don't know.
Well, I haven't had the luxury of ever drafting Alvin Kamara. He always seems to be gone by the time I'm picking him. So, but I'm always able to go ahead each year at least one opportunity or another to pick Derrick Henry, and I never let that slip by. And I do have him in the sleeper league that I'm actually leading the league in, and I am very grateful for that because he has been my top performer. Chris, I think Derrick Henry, he leads the NFL in rushing once again, but yet he is so underrated. I feel like not only in fantasy, but in real life, I just feel like he's so underrated. Am I wrong on that?
Not at all. He completely is. And Dom noted during the game this past Sunday, for such a big guy and how punishing he is to opposing players, he's fast for his size.
Yes,
I think that's
you saw that highlight.
Super impressive. I mean, he is not running out of gas as he breaks down the field by any means. I think Dom hit the nail on the head. The Titans have been throwing a lot, especially down there near the goal line, which is good for the Jonnu Smiths of the world, I guess, or Ryan Tannehill's rushing TDs. But it could be a function too of teams are like, we can't let Derrick Henry get the ball, and the Titans are adjusting accordingly. As the season goes on, I don't know if that'll still be the case, but if a guy like that is getting that many touches with that many yards, speaking firsthand from some of the running backs we have on our teams, I'd be glad to have that problem where Henry isn't getting as many touchdowns as he should. The yards alone rack up, and the fact that he can hit a home run at any notice. We saw him do it against Jacksonville on Thursday Night Football when he ripped off I think it was a 99-yarder. So that can happen at any time. Sit back and enjoy. I wish we had Derrick Henry.
I do sit back and enjoy it. Thank you very much, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. But it just seems like this is because I think we've touched on this subject last year, where he just is not scoring commensurate to what he's actually giving you in production, and it's kind of like almost like a disconnect. Now he is being thrown to a little more, I think, in this year, from what I'm seeing. At least he's getting the yardage anyways, receiving wise. That's helping. 50 yards in receiving is definitely something that's a bonus for him, who's not someone that's really noted to do that well in receiving as compared to Kamara and some others. But it's nice to see that he's really done a great job. And with fewer and fewer options in the running back market, Dom, it becomes more apparent that Derrick Henry may become a sell high prospect, perhaps.
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, I've seen teams. We play in 2 leagues, and they have Derrick Henry. I think that he doesn't move a spot at all. And if you're going to offer him, they're going to offer to try to get Derrick Henry. You're going to lose a lot of receivers or like one of your top running backs. So at this point, we're 6 weeks into the season. You never know. The Titans play the Steelers on Sunday. Who knows what the Steelers are planning to do to stop Derrick Henry? So you just don't know. Some running backs can get hot. They can get cold. So if you're going to try to sell him high, I would try to acquire some good receivers or just try to get 2 decent running backs.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I could see him being packaged right now for maybe Ronald Jones and a wide receiver or something like that. That would be, I think, a fair trade right now. But it's very interesting to see. I mean, Derrick Henry should get all the credit in the world on being a great running back. I don't think he gets his just due. It's kind of unfair. And in a day and age where the running back position is somewhat devalued, it's good to see someone do an old-fashioned run up the gut every now and then and get 10, 20 yards. In his case, 94, and see where it goes from there. Like you said, Chris, the speed is just absolutely incredible. At the end, he's keeping pace with cornerbacks, which is just truly outstanding for a guy his size.
Yeah, really impressive. And if you ask Josh Norman, he'll knock you on your behind too while you're at it.
Which is the case indeed. But if you got Derrick Henry and you're looking at prospects as far as being able to trade him, I would say now's the time, but make sure it's something for a trade that you think is going to get you a lot back in return, because at this point, Derrick Henry cannot be at a higher value right now for fantasy owners. All right, it's been a great episode so far, and I thank Dominic and Chris Lardieri from Dom-Ination Sports Nation, as always, for being on the program. Before we head on out and before we head into the doghouse and an update on our Pick'em Challenge, I wanted to ask you guys this, and I'll start off with you first, Dominic. Kickers, which is, I guess, such a volatile issue or a divisive issue. Should we allow kickers? Should we not allow kickers? Should we just stream kickers? Should you hold on to a kickers? That's what I want to ask you, Dom, first, and that is, I've got Justin Tucker from Baltimore. And, I'll tell you what, he's been a great godsend for me. I always value in the draft getting and reaching for a good kicker. I know most owners that I speak to always try to say, you know what, just stream your kickers and you're fine. I don't think that's the case. I like stability. I have to stream him now because it's on a bye week, but I want to ask you this. Do you believe in the value of not picking a kicker or all until the very end and streaming them, or do you value the weight of having a good kicker?
Honestly, I think my dad and I don't know if we reached for Robbie Gould in one of our drafts that we had, but he was out there, so we picked him. So if you're gonna reach for a kicker, try to get a guy like Justin Tucker or Harrison Butker, because you don't have to move them at all unless they get hurt or they have a bye week. You just keep them in their kicker position. You don't have to do any much of anything really for the season in your kicker spot. So if you can do that, it'd be good. But if you're waiting till the last pick of the draft to get a kicker, I don't think there's going to be much out there. A lot of people get kickers at the end, so you're probably not going to get as much of a good kicker as you want. So I would say get one early, like you said. Don't try to reach for one, but at least get a good kicker.
And just something for me, it adds up to extra points, I think, throughout the year, plus consistency. If you can find a real consistent kicker, I think it goes a long way. But Chris, I don't know what side of the fence you go on as far as the value of the kicker or streaming it. It just seems like when I've talked to people out there, it seems to be on one side of the fence or the other. It's almost like it's a political thing.
Yeah, we typically don't reach for kickers. I've had Tucker in the past, but I haven't in a few years. But I definitely get the value of trying to get a guy like him, or like Dom said, Butker. In our case, we're pretty happy with Robbie Gould. We had Will Lutz in another league. We just didn't have the bench space to keep him during his bye week. We dumped him. We ran the risk. Someone else picked him up. And the kickers we had to choose from, frankly, were in the same total points season to date neighborhood that Lutz was. So I don't think it was a big risk or a big challenge to our team. Let's face it, at times kickers are streaky and they can be frustrating, much like defenses, as we've talked about previously. So if you don't get that top echelon kicker, wait around and feel free to stream, or maybe your kicker's not performing. Dump him, find another one, and ride him out for the rest of the season, especially if he's after his bye week. I mean, there's a Young Wei Koo from the Falcons is a great example. He was in demand this week on waivers. He's been putting up a lot of points. He can be streaky at times, but when he's on, forget it. What was it, Dom? Like 1 week he had a ridiculous amount of points, and he was all the rage on waivers.
Yeah, he actually had 23 points this past week because Falcons had a lot of points and a lot of extra points. He also had a 56-yard field goal, so there's the consistency right there you're talking about.
I look for accuracy. I think that to me is something that I look at overall as far as from season to season. How accurate is the kicker? Because it's not always on the team that you're playing on. Even if you're on a lower scoring team, if you maximize it out by going ahead and getting a lot of field goals and extra points, that's still one way you can go ahead and at least assure yourself with an accurate kicker the best way to go ahead and score if possible. It gives me that reassurance when you get a top flight kicker that you can go ahead and, you know what, at least I'm giving and putting out there the best team I can. Putting out a kicker that's like, all right. I think you're leaving a lot of points on the table.
Indeed.
Well, all right. It's been a great time with you guys. But before we go ahead and depress everyone out there, I wanted to go ahead and give a reach out to Daniel for watching. Thank you so much, Daniel, for watching. We truly appreciate it. Always great to have people checking out our show each and every time out. If you have any questions for us, you can either drop it right here or at Chris L Sports on Twitter, at Dom-Ination Sports Nation on Instagram, and also Inside Sports Fantasy Football on Facebook, IS Fantasy Football at yahoo.com, or at Inside Sports FF on Twitter as well. Well, before we head on out and before we go ahead and update everyone on our Pick'em Challenge, woof, woof, woof. It's time once again to head to the doghouse, which is this year has been a bane or a thorn in Chris's side.
It has been a doghouse. It started out as a play on words. I like to pick underdogs, and boy, I like to pick them, but I don't pick them well. Picked the Cowboys this week, and not only did they not cover, I don't think they even showed up Monday night, much to the dismay of some of the fans in the stands there in Texas. But I am now, I believe, 1-5, I think, Gerald, 6 weeks in. So not a good record. I've had better years, but I will keep plugging along. There are a couple ones that stood out to me this week. The Steelers-Titans game, which should be a good one. Titans are favored by 1 at home. It's essentially a pick 'em. Didn't really have the guts to go out on a limb with the Steelers there, just because I think the Titans are for real, and I'm not quite sure how the Steelers will do on the road. But another one that stuck out to me, the Buccaneers going into Vegas to take on the Raiders, and the Raiders, coming off a big win against the Chiefs and then a bye week, are still 3.5-point underdogs at home. And my magic rule, you get that extra half a point anywhere around like a 3 or a 7 number, you take it. And I think too, the Bucs are coming off a huge week. They're gonna have to travel out west. Might be due for a letdown. Plus, I think Gruden, given the extra week to prepare, he's going to want to show Tom Brady who's boss. It'll be the battle of the two former bad color commentators, Bruce Arians and John Gruden. So I don't know if the Raiders win, but I've got enough faith in them to keep it close within a field goal, take them in the 3.5. And if I'm wrong, don't blame me. I warned you.
Oh, you warned us indeed. Adam Reyes is also watching, and he was asking, I wanted to go ahead and reach out to him as well. Thank you so much for watching us. Adam Reyes is asking, when players are questionable during the week, how much should we put into that for starting them on Sunday? Because questionable seems like it's the line, the gray line between, whether they are going to play or not. We've seen it actually this past week. If you're a Saints fan, or if you got players on the Saints, you had Cook as tight end and also Michael Thomas, both listed as questionable for the same game. One played, one didn't. So, Chris, I want to hear your thoughts on that. And also, thanks again to Adam Reyes for going ahead and reaching out to us on Facebook.
Hey, Dom and I know that guy. Thanks for listening, Adam. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
So here's the problem. The injury report, no one will tell you this, was created because the NFL wanted to give a nod to the gamblers, even though they never condoned gambling until a few years ago.
Of course.
And then most recently, they did away with the probable in the injury report. So Dom will come up to me once a week. Dad, Mike Evans is questionable. He's questionable every week. I don't know why. He was legitimately hurt the first week, but played. So now questionable is a new probable, but there could be lumped in there the actual questionable guys. So what it comes down to now is it's like the old Bill Belichick move where you put everyone on the injury report just to mess with the other team or send a kind of a middle finger to the league office. I don't know what he would do with some sort of weird mind game. But in this case, we don't know. So someone questionable is hurt. We don't know to what extent. So what Dom and I have taken to doing, and I don't know if you do this too, Gerald, we scour the internet the morning of the games. We have to watch or read what Jay Glazer, or Adam Schefter, or Jason Lockhamfor, or you name it, says is going to play or not. But then that problem lies, well, what if your guy's going in the late game, the 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern game, or even the Sunday night game? We got burned by Devontae Adams one week on a Monday night. It's a real nightmare. So I guess you got to do a little more homework, or at times, I guess you just have to be cautious and go with the sure thing. But there are certain guys, I just feel like Mike Evans is always listed as questionable, and you'll start to notice these trends.
I read on the reports leading into the days, into the game, if they practice. I think that's a key for me. If they didn't practice or were very limited in practice, I think that's a sign that I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and keep him on the bench, or that individual on the bench, for another week. Dominic, what are your thoughts on the questionable status of questionable?
Yeah, I've actually seen a guy like Kareem Hunt. He's had a lingering groin injury. He's always listed as questionable. He'd say he's good to go in practice, and Yahoo still puts him as questionable. Like you said, Dad, Mike Evans, he's always questionable too. He's had a lingering toe injury now. Had an ankle injury. So just that type of year where you're going to see a ton of guys questionable. Even a guy like we stashed Justin Jackson. He's actually a starter for us now because it's come down to that in one of our leagues. So he's listed as questionable too. So you just don't know at this point.
On my ESPN team, I would be glad to have questionable Justin Jackson right now. I've had to pick up the bare bones of 2, not 1, but 2 of my starting running backs were just picked up off the waiver wire, to give you an idea. So that's how much in dire straits there due to injury I am on my ESPN league. But that's a great question, Adam. We truly appreciate you asking it out there. We cannot thank you enough for doing so. And again, if you have any questions for us during the week or just before game time, at Chris L Sports, at Inside Sports Fantasy Football, right there for you. Also as well on Facebook, at Chris L Sports once again on Twitter, at Dom-Ination Sports Nation on Instagram, and also at Inside Sports, excuse me, at Inside Sports FF on Twitter as well. So you want to go ahead and give us that shout out if you have any questions, because we do get them from time to time as far as, should I start this guy? Should I trade for this person? Trade for that player? So if you have any questions on fantasy football, go ahead and give us a shout out. But before we head on out, guys, because it's been a great run, but I know a certain individual has to get up in the morning for educational type deal. I want to go ahead and give everyone an update on our unfortunate Pick'em Challenge so far. So this past weekend, we'll start with Chris. He was coming into the weekend at 10-5. He picked Green Bay, the Rams, and the Cowboys. So let's see what happened there. I know the Cowboys didn't cover, that's for sure. Green Bay, they didn't cover because they got blown out. And the Rams, unfortunately, didn't cover as well. So that's an 0-3 weekend. So that puts you at 10-8 right now. Myself, I was suffering heavily going into the weekend at 6-9. I started off hot, and then I just went off the deep end. 6-9 going into the weekend. I picked Miami 8.5. Let's see if that covered. I don't remember if it did. Yes, of course it did, because they shut out the Jets. But you know what? If they're just playing someone from New York at this point in time, you should just go ahead and say, they cover. Jackson, I know, I was just kidding. That was a bad shot, and I apologize for that.
That's the truth.
No, we know the Giants are bad.
But Jacksonville did not cover, so it's 1-1 right there. And Washington. The Washington football team were actually underdogs by 1 point, and they ended up, it was a wash. So they lost.
You get a tie.
So I get a tie. So right there for you, I was pushed. So 1-1-1, we'll say. So I'm not caught up as of yet. Still a commanding lead. We'll see every weekend. If you check out Inside Sports Fantasy Football on Facebook, we will go ahead and put our 3 picks for our Pick'em Challenge. So hopefully you'll give us a shot right there. And maybe someday, some year, I'll actually get even close to Chris once again on the scores. So I'm still behind by over 3 games. I think 3 and your favorite 3.5. I think that puts me at right now. So.
Yeah. I just realized I picked the Browns last week in the doghouse, but regardless, I took the proverbial collar 0 for 4, Gerald. And if I have another one of those weeks, which, hey, I'm more than capable of doing, you're back in this. We're going to have an NFC East type race to the finish here.
Oh, there you go. Or as people say, the NFC least. But
absolutely
indeed. All right, guys, it's been great having you aboard once again. If you have any questions, please give us a shout out right there. Like I said, Dominic at Dom-Ination Sports Nation on Instagram, at Chris L Sports on Twitter, also as well at Inside Sports FF on Twitter, or IS Fantasy Football at yahoo.com. Any last thoughts, my friend, on the way out?
Dom, I have enough to say. Dom, the floor is yours.
If you're looking to trade for a guy, I would say try to trade for Ronald Jones. He had a good week, but also not just that. You can buy low and sell high because the Raiders look like they have a good rushing defense. They shut down Clyde Edwards-Helaire against the Chiefs, so you could try to trade for him if he has a bad week on Sunday Night Football.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm hoping it will continue as far as the success is concerned, because he's a flex for me. That's how good my sleeper team is. When you have Ronald Jones performing at a flex and you can keep him there consistently, I'm hoping it will continue. So I'm hoping for good things. That was a player right there. You weren't sure at the beginning of the season where it stood, because Tampa Bay loaded up on the X running backs from X wherever to go ahead and fill up that roster. And it looked like that Ronald Jones' starting position would be in jeopardy, but he's been a solid performer for fantasy owners, and it's a credit to him. And, he felt that breathing down his neck, and it sounds like, Chris, that it's actually worked really well, because he's been very injured or very inconsistent his first couple of years in the league.
Yeah, I know I was skeptical, but it's definitely worked. And, as Fournette continues to get hobbled by injury, Jones just makes the most of his opportunities.
And going forward, I think if he continues to stay healthy, I see him as the cornerstone of the Tampa Bay offense. So that's a good thing for people like me. Yay! It's funny because you have that dichotomy of one team doing really good and you've made all the right moves, and then the other team unfortunately not quite so good as well. Well, guys, it's been great talking to you both on today's program. Dominic, can I look forward to having you back on next week?
Yes, of course.
All right, sounds good. Chris, obviously you're going to be back as the fellow host that you are. Great to have you guys on the show once again, and thank you so much for watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching on Facebook Live. We truly appreciate it. Once again, it's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. We cannot thank you enough for watching us, listening to us, and being a part of each week right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.